Hi, Sunil. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for being here today.
Great to be here.
Wonderful. So we're going to be talking about Diversio, the intersection of data, technology, and human expertise. Now, let me just tell our audience a little bit about Diversio. So Diversio is a people intelligence platform that measures, tracks, and improves diversity, equity, and inclusion by connecting AI technology, sophisticated data analytics, and knowledgeable subject matter experts. Diversio is able to accurately diagnose organization pain points, benchmark them against peers, and create a robust action plan that will meet DE&I needs. Through the unique combination of technology and human expertise, Diversio is driving meaningful impact for hundreds of organizations across over 35 countries globally. Now, Sunil, I've got a couple of questions for you. If we could kickstart by me asking you, you're operating at the intersection of data, technology, and people insights. Can you tell us what Diversio is and how is it helping leaders to make right evidence-based actions to create more inclusive and equitable workplaces? And what unique insights does your tech actually provide? What sets you apart and what makes you different?
Yeah, thanks, Meenakshi. Just nice, easy question for me first thing in the morning. I love those questions.
Thank you.
I thought it might be worthwhile just taking it back a little bit in terms of where it all began, because I think that context sets the scene. Excuse me. So Diversio was founded in March 2018. Our CEO and co-founder Laura McGee used to work at McKinsey. I can never tell this story as well as she can, but basically she worked in the human capital practice. And part of that work was working with corporate North America CEOs and having the conversation around what does diversity, equity, inclusion mean to you, and what are you doing about it? Two broad responses. It's a little bit fluffy. And I think the one that I want everyone to sort of remind themselves, it feels a bit like throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping it will stick. With that feedback, we kind of put together three pillars that has basically formed where the company has gone and continued to go. One, how to elevate diversity, equity, inclusion as a strategic pillar like any other major functional component of an organization, sales and marketing, HR. Two, exactly as you said earlier, how to leverage AI and technology to advance D&I at pace. And three, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So how to really focus on data to drive change. To be fair, you said it really succinctly in the introduction. Put really simply, we help companies define, measure, track diversity, equity, inclusion, and most importantly, put actions in place to address diagnosed pain points. And the key part there is around inclusion. Personally, personal opinion, I feel the industry is a little bit confused between what inclusion means and what diversity means. And for us at Diversio, what we have done, we have defined a 6-part inclusion framework, which has been built with academic institutions, tested and validated with 500 companies globally. That is the cornerstone of our platform and our product, and everything hangs around it. As you said, it's actually 400 clients, glad to say, well over 400 clients now globally who are using our technology across multiple industries, media, CPG, construction, the investment industry, in well over 35 countries. What's unique about our technology is our ability to mine pain points from free text responses. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about how the solution works. But essentially, what we are doing is capturing employee experience data, diversity data, all anonymous, all GDPR protected, all within the legal and cultural constraints if you're a multinational organization in a safe environment. We provide the communications for employers to communicate the survey and engagement out to the employees. And through that experience, we're able to do some really sophisticated analytics, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. And with that analytics, diagnose pain points and put recommendations in place. One of the really cool pieces of technology is our ability to mine free text responses. Just imagine the amount of focus groups that you would need to get, and we all know how focus groups can be relatively difficult to navigate to get really true lived experience and sentiment. The technology does that super coolly using in-house algorithms. Further, once we have isolated those pain points, the technology then goes into a database of proven recommendations, over 1,600, that have driven diversity, equity, and inclusion against those pain points. So specific recommendations to specific pain points. No longer does it now feel that you're throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping it sticks, because the combination of insight, data, analytics, technology, and human experience brings it all together.
Thank you for sharing that, Sunil. And I think when organizations are starting off on their DE&I journey, often you find that they don't know where to start and how to start. And having that baseline data is just so important, to enable us to have that qualitative and quantitative data, to be able to action our strategy through evidence. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I think one of the things that we didn't perhaps touch upon, and I may have missed that, is your founders are two very young female entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about them, to put some kind of, and we'd love to hear from them at one of the future summits. But tell us a little bit about Laura and her colleague.
Yeah. Well, I must be. It's 7 minutes past 5 right now. I'd hope they're still fast asleep. So if you were to invite them, can we please make it sort of EST time?
We will do next time.
No, but we are female-founded business. In fact, it's great that we're having the summit today. Last week we announced our Series A round, the successful round of $6.5 million, which is going to obviously support our growth and development. But yeah, both Laura was at McKinsey. I think Anya worked at World Bank of Canada. And it was one of those, great startup stories where they met over a coffee, and based on some of that insight from the work that Laura did and the work that Anya was doing in academia and research and her work at World Bank of Canada, it just came together that there was something here about building an organization that can really help drive diversity, equity, and inclusion for businesses. I think importantly, of all shapes and sizes. This wasn't just about the big corporates. This wasn't just about the SMEs. It wasn't just about investors. Sorry, pardon the pun. Being inclusive in terms of the impact that we would have. They would have, we would have.
I'm in absolute awe of them, and I look forward to meeting Laura in the near future. Moving on, language seems to be in the news quite a bit at the moment. It was on the news last night as well. Can I ask you, Diversio is working towards making inclusion a global language. How does this play out when diversity and inclusion appears so differently in different parts of the world? How do you make D&I a global language?
Yeah, great question. I think, first of all, there's alignment on what we mean by diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, alignment there. Secondly, really laser focus on the nuances and the differences from country to country, region to region, country to country. So I guess the audience will know that there are certain things you cannot capture. So how do you ensure that you're compliant legally and you're aware of all the cultural sensitivities around what you can capture? Then there's the beauty of doing anonymous data capture and disaggregating all of the data. So you're not, as long as you are especially cognizant of the legal and cultural barriers. After that, the universe of data that you can collect in a uniform way is literally endless. And that's where the journey starts. I mean, we work with many multinationals who have operations all around the world. The survey is, the product starts with a survey, and straight away, if you have a multinational organization, we'll ask, where are you based? Knowing where you're based, you'll get the survey specific to your country. And the classifications around race and ethnicity are all consistent. But with the de-aggregation, with the use of technology, we can harmonize and normalize to present really detailed insight and analytics.
Mm-hmm. And what are the type of key themes that are coming out from this global language?
Yeah, I mean, I think as well as there are differences for sure. There are differences, there are nuances from country to country. But what we're able to do, because we're able to harmonize, we're able to sort of highlight specific pain points, and we're also be able to double click into a specific country or a specific region if they're specific to that part of the organization. Our recommendation engine has been trained to understand that not every policy is going to implement the same, because again, there are differences. So the recommendations we've done on systematic scrape in terms of where was the recommendation implemented, was it academically validated, and was there actually a benefit in terms of the implementation? So it's highly contextualized. So even if there is a nuance, the recommendation is smart enough to know with that nuance, this is the right solution for that country, for that region, for that industry.
That's really, really interesting. That's a very, very clever piece of data, Sunil.
Thank you.
Wonderful. If we can just take a step back and talk about the business imperative, not the business case, not the moral case, but look, this has become the business imperative. We know D&I is no longer a nice to have, it's the business imperative, and it gives organizations a competitive advantage. We all now know that. How is Diversio cutting through all that noise and delivering those impactful results? What's that USP that you have that is driving, really great results, as you've just kind of explained to us?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'll do that to 3 examples.
Okay.
I won't name the client because obviously it's public, that's private information. But we have a construction company that, after the murder of George Floyd, found that on their building sites there was lots of racial disharmony and acts of really quite nasty stuff, really, quite frankly. So they engaged Diversio to help them understand what is the employee experience and sentiment within the organization. And I think they were quite shocked with what they saw. But at the same time, through the recommendations, we're able to put meaningful interventions in place to address a lot of the racism in the company, which some of it was unconscious, some of it was conscious. But the valuable thing here is that this particular construction company has now taken that data, taken that insight, taken the aggregated inclusion score, taken the executive bonus, and taken 8% of that bonus, and it's only attributable should the company drive the inclusion score in the organization. For me personally, that says everything about when a company embraces the data, the analytics, the insight, and start to act. When you take it to that level, it really does demonstrate they're taking this really seriously, because they can see the impact from a risk perspective, from an innovation perspective, from a lack of inclusivity perspective. I think that's one example. The second example, I mentioned we were founded in March 2018. We're coming up to our 40th anniversary. What we've started to do is doing some longitudinal research. We have a lot of academic institutions asking exactly the same question you're asking us. What we're trying to get our arms around is what would be best in class increase in the inclusion score as a number of percentage points. And we think it's about 4 percentage points. And with that analysis, we're able to help companies understand, so what does that mean in terms of your recruitment and hiring? What does that potentially mean in terms of your return? What does that mean in terms of your level of innovation? Probably for another time, because I know we don't have enough time, but we have one of our products, we use our NLP to look at the leading indices across the US and the UK. And what we're able to do with that work is retrofit from employee review sites, how inclusive that company is. And some of our research that we've done on it, we've looked at I think it's the S&P 500, we looked at the IT sector, and we looked at those that are high performing and those that are low performing. There's a strong correlation between those who are high performing and those who have a high Diversio score. Conversely, there's a strong correlation between those who are low performing and a low Diversio score. So that kind of gives you that sort of rule of inference. I mean, diversity and inclusion has been around with us for many, many years, but the events of the last few years has really accelerated the need. So I think the data is still emerging. We're certainly leading. I think the other piece, which is our investor product called Diversity Analytics, which is specifically for general partners, and we help them determine the social factor exposure of their portfolio companies. So if you imagine, if you have a number of portfolio investments through our technology, you're able to see where you have risk because their inclusion scores are low, and where you have great opportunity for value creation because their inclusion scores are high. Because if we for 1 minute now just dismiss the fact there is no need for business case, you're managing risk, you're innovating better, you're generating value.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you. That's amazing what you have just shared. Just one thought from me. I was just casting back to a conversation that I had with a chief people officer a couple of weeks ago, and they're doing amazing work, and they're driving that change. The one question he asked me is, how can we speed up what we do? can the tool help speed up some of the processes that we are trying to get through in our organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question, and if we take a, I don't know, a typical organization with thousands of employees, if we take that we want to capture the data and then we want to do something with the data, how do you cut through that super quick? Well, one, you have fantastic engagement and communications that clearly explains why the work is being done, how the data is being used, and how the experience is critical to success. We typically get 82 to 85% engagement rate on our survey, and about a 98% completion rate. So, and we take great care in terms of the design of the questions, how they're laid out, and how we do the scaling. Because if you're going to do that work up front, that's going to be, I don't know, a significant contributor to the speed, because you're getting the data in quicker. Secondly, is using tech, and we've spoken about it already, but how you can use tech to cut through reams and reams of data to A, do the consolidation, and then C, do the analytics. Now, there are some organizations that have got doing a great job with collecting data. Now, what do you do with it? Where do you go? So that takes forever. Well, in our case, we have our recommendation engine, which we've spoken about before, which systematically looks at organizational pain points and makes recommendations. And you know what the big wake-up call is, Meenakshi? Is our benchmarking database. If that doesn't cause a shock to the system, our benchmark database consists of 21,000 companies across 100 countries. And invariably, when you see where you are against your peer group, that makes you take action, because there's a war on talent, there's a great resignation. You really would prefer the best talent in the marketplace coming to you versus going to your competition.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sunil. Thank you very much for that. And I'm just conscious of time, and I want to bring a couple of questions off the virtual floor. So a question off the virtual floor: how do we ensure an overemphasis on data does not remove the humanity, the people, and their nuances from DE&I?
Yeah, and having said everything about the tech and how it works, there is always an element of human intervention to ensure that what the tech is telling us is right and fair. I think we have a correlation of 0.92, please don't quote me on that, between what the technology is telling us and what a human brain could probably put together. So to mitigate that, there's always an element of human expertise to oversee, overlay, as we engage with our clients end-to-end through the process.
Yeah, and I think earlier we spoke about Diversio being a combination of data, technology, and human expertise. So we should never, ever forget that there are humans behind Diversio. And it just feels so, and we are talking about humanizing the hybrid, aren't we, today? So it's so important for all of us to remember that, Diversio is led by humans and not just technology or robots.
Yeah, I can guarantee I'm not an avatar or robot. I'm a physical human being in a house in Watford Bushy. You are talking to humans. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about data, and data often comes up in lots of conversations that I have. So we exist in a data-driven world. So why is data so critical now more than ever before? Because it seems to be on everybody's agenda, data and analytics. How is data breaking the barriers, and how does data become the crucial piece in creating an inclusive future? Sorry, there's a lot of questions there, but I've got lots of things that I've got going on in my mind.
No, that's fine, Meenakshi. And let's start with data and some of these facts are in the public domain. 9 out of 10 consumers want brands to take a brand. Sorry, 9 out of 10 consumers want brands to take a stand on D&I, and 76% will conduct follow-up research to see if they're authentic. Data point 1. Data point 2, 7% is the average drop in the company's market value following a racial, sexual harassment or scandal. Recently, there was a cricket club in the UK that had, unfortunately, some real problems around race. Just imagine for 1 minute if that cricket club was a FTSE 100, all the investors pulling out, all of the leadership pulling out. Number 2. Number 3, and my daughters are kind of in this age group. Millennials have already left their company for a more inclusive one, and 42% say they will leave within 2 years. That's 3 data points of 1,000 million, loads of data points. So how is data breaking down barriers? Well, it all starts with the awareness. What if I could tell you and that everyone on this call that through our dashboard that the experience of the dominant group, typically in North American business, white male heterosexual without disability. The experience of the dominant group against non-dominant groups on workplace flexibility or safety is 4 times more favorable for the dominant group. If I could tell you that. If I could tell you that those who identify as LGBTQ+ aren't progressing beyond middle management, if I tell you that. What about if I can tell you by department or function, marketing has a well below average score on workplace safety compared to finance? And if you're a multinational, what if I can tell you that your employees in Germany are scoring considerably lower on inclusion compared to your employees in Japan? What if I could tell you on workplace safety that your black women employees, the experience of black women in your organization on workplace safety is 3 times lower than that of white women in your organization? That's actually a true fact from a client. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the data points we can take from diversity. I haven't counted. There must be hundreds. There must be thousands. You imagine putting that in the hands of decision makers and the awareness that will create. And that construction company very much went through that journey, and many companies go through that journey. It's like, OMG, I had no idea, because the sentiment arguably isn't traveling through the organization into leadership in order to take action. So now you have this transparency in a safe environment, which, you know, employees can feel genuinely open to want to share their lived experience. You get the lived experience, you take action. Where does that come from? It comes from data. And we spoke about it already in terms of our recommendations engine and how that works.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sunil, for that. And look, every sector is currently facing a diversity deficit. You know, whether it's food manufacturing, whether it's sport, whether it's you know, finance, insurance. But what we do know, and look, I have been working in this industry for many years now. I do believe that we are at that biggest reset moment of our lives, the way we live, the way we work, and how we can drive sustainable change. And we need sustainability at what we do. You know, we can all create really great D&I action plans, but they cannot just be for the today and the now. They've got to be designed and delivered so that they are future fit, they are sustainable as well. And I truly am, you know, a great believer of that. Diversio can be the cog in that wheel to deliver, you know, D&I action plans which are sustainable and that they speak to the future. Because if we were to look at, you know, look into 2052, are we behaving? Are our behaviors and actions speaking into the future? And often I think they're not.
Yeah, 100%. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank
you. Just some thoughts. If you were to give our conference delegates, you know, one piece of advice, you know, that would advance their D&I journey, you know, irrespective of, you know, where they are in their journey. You know, we know many organizations are way ahead. You know, there are the Unilevers and the EYs of the world today, Accenture, they're way ahead in their journey. Some are midway, some are just thinking about getting onto the D&I journey. What piece of advice could you give?
Yeah, thanks, Meenakshi. And you know what? There was a bit of landmark news, I thought, this week in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion. I don't know if you saw it, but, and this isn't financial advice, but M&G launched a diversity and inclusion equity fund, which includes 30 to 40 stocks who are performing best on gender and racial equality. That, I thought, was quite a statement in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think it's worthwhile reflecting on what they say. Left undressed, the exclusion of disadvantaged groups and lack of diversity can be costly and result in lost GDP and human capital wealth, whereas pioneers of D&I initiatives are being recognized for their financial outperformance. That, I thought, was a stunning summary. So the advice I would give, you know, even if you are doing incredibly well, is go into your, if it is the CFO holding the money banks, go into their office and demand the investment you need to make the difference that you and your teams know you can make, and get fully funded. Because without that investment, a lot of the things that we've just spoken about, and I guess will be spoken throughout during the day, it's just not going to happen. And I think you'll be skirting around the edges. So, you know, just like you do your marketing plan or your sales plan, do your D&I plan and get fully funded.
I think funding is the big issue here. often many organizations grapple with getting, they want to drive the change, but the money is not there. The D&I money is not there. Just kind of going off piece a little bit, and we're just coming up to the last couple of minutes. I often get asked about the position of the global head of D&I, the chief diversity officer, where that position should sit. And I'm a strong believer that that position should be sat right next to the CEO, the D&I position, because I think when the D&I agenda is on the CEO's agenda, and when the D&I leader has got a seat at the table, I do feel that we can drive change quicker, we can go further and faster, we can get the funding, we get the budgets that you've just been speaking about. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we speak to many organizations, not all those 400 are conversions, some we just don't convert. And I think the ones that fall into the latter category, what they haven't done is ingrain D&I across the whole of the organization. And it's not just a people issue, because if it's a people issue, it's going to naturally gravitate in the HR realms, and which is fine, the CPO space. But if we want the inclusion, throughout the ecosystem of organization, throughout the value chain, I couldn't agree with you more. That individual needs to sit, shoulder to shoulder with the CEO and their leadership team, because then you've got the helicopter view. It's not just about, diversity and inclusion in marketing, diversity and inclusion in supply chain, supplier diversity and inclusion. It's not just a people thing. It's an organizational thing.
Thank you, Sunil, for that. And I've got another string of questions for you, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So I think we will have to continue this conversation offline now.
Meenakshi, I'd love to. By all means, I'll address the questions in whatever form the conferencing panel allows. But
absolutely,
I'll be led by you and the team.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Sunil, thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps next time we can have Laura on the call together with us as well. Thank you for sharing all the insights and why data technology is so important for organizations who are, either beginning of their journey or even whilst they're on their journey, because there is still time to kind of fix this and get this done right. So thank you so much, and we shall certainly catch up with you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Wish everyone all the best for the rest of the day. Bye for now.